Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the September 2019 Patreon update. I'm actually trying this for the second time because somehow I accidentally hit a button and turned the last one off too soon, but c'est la vie. I've got some goodies for you, but before we jump into those things, I want to give you an update on the ministry. First of all, with the recommendations from other people and with time moving on and not hearing from Douglas Gresham, we're going to go ahead and call the study center the Christian Study Center of Chattanooga. And we, a few days ago, got our website going and a website address, which is just going to be chattanoogastudycenter.org, all one word. As usual, I'll have links to all this. And I have run across something very interesting. There were a lot of people were saying, including my board members, were saying, we really like to have this, have the name C.S. Lewis here. But what I've found out is that at least right now, the students at UTC, a lot of them don't know who C.S. Lewis is. Now, that might be a surprise to us, but it's just the media world that they're involved with. They might have seen the Narnia movies, probably did see the Narnia movies when they were kids on DVD, maybe saw one or two of them, but it's just not something that's going on right now, and so it's just not on their radar. And so when it comes to any sort of imperative, we need to have C.S. Lewis in the name, when it comes to the students at any rate we're trying to reach, it's not really an issue after all. I'm just about done with all the legal stuff that needs to be done. The form that I needed to submit to Nashville in order to be able to have people give directly to the ministry. I wanted to have a lawyer look over things before I did that, and I've just been able to have that meeting, and so that should be off soon. When it comes to the website, you'll notice if you scroll down at chattanoogastudycenter.org, you'll see that there's basically three things that we're doing right now with the Study Center. First of all is our October 7 lecture with Heather Hess about Surprised by Joy. You want to be sure to come to that if you can. I'm sure it'll be interesting. The morning prayer service in Danforth Chapel, 3 days a week at 8:15. Though on Fridays there's a particular ministry leader who will remain nameless who wants to come a little bit later than 8:15. And so I will hang around for a little bit longer and not start right at 8:15 once he gets there. And then the weekly luncheon discussions about C.S. Lewis related topics. Had the first one this last Monday. The facility with First Presbyterian Church went great. They're doing a great job there helping this to get going. I had one student show up. I was happy to have anybody to show up, because the UTC students, they're busy. We don't, the typical UTC student is not a scholar who has time to sit around and discuss philosophy and books and take extra courses and read extra books and stuff. These people are hoofing it. They have two or three, they've got extra jobs. They're just trying to get their qualification, to get their bachelor's degree so they can get a job later on. They're worried about the debt they're getting into and what they're going to do when they get out. As one ministry leader told me, you're doing good to get students to attend one really good event, maybe a semester or even a year. So I'm not really, I'm not working hard on events. I mean, we've got this October lecture, and professors are going to be offering extra credit for that, so the students will probably come. And then we will have the usual annual lecture in the spring, which our study center will co-sponsor, as the C.S. Lewis Society in the past has co-sponsored it. But the thing is that if students come to anything, I'm happy about that. Now, word is still getting out. I bought an ad in the Echo campus newspaper to try to get the word out about the luncheon. I've met a lot of students, and they're all excited about it, and they say they're going to try and come. But like I had one student who said, I'll be there if I can get my homework done. She obviously didn't get her homework done. She works 3 days a week after school at CCS. they're busy. But the discussion with the young fellow was good and encouraging. I'm sure he's going to be back. He's going to do his best to get some more people to come, and we're just going to keep pressing on, and it'll be what it'll be. In the meantime, I'm going to get permission, however I can do this. I'm just now about to look into this. In the Student Center, different causes or organizations or clubs or whatever can set up a table to inform the public and recruit and these sorts of things, and I'm going to see what it takes to do something like that. And I'm going to get a C.S. Lewis Narnia table or something set up, and just try to meet students who do know about Lewis, who are fans of Narnia, and I just see where it goes from there. But it's a way of trying to actively meet students other than hanging out at the Newman Center or at the Hub, which I do regularly. Of course, meeting more students that I'm attending class with, and just the other, and then coffee shops or whatever, the stuff that's going on there, because I am meeting students and getting to know people. The faculty thing is something that I'm chipping away at. There is a bi-weekly book club a book discussion that the faculty attend. And I've started attending that, and I met a couple of new people last time. I'll just keep pressing on that as we continue to try to understand what it is that the Lord wants us to do for the faculty, because the study center is not going to be, I'm sure we're going to be able to minister to students, but I'm wondering if maybe our biggest impact or our focus or concentration might not be with faculty, and then they can minister to students. We'll see how that goes as we pray, as we talk, and as we just follow the Lord. We'll see what it is He's got in mind. So let's see if there's anything else I need to tell you about ministry-wise. I think that's it right now. So let me move on to some other things. You'll find that accompanying this video, I've got some links to a couple of articles. One of our patron supporters, a friend of mine, sent me a National Review book review that's online by a man named Eishleman, I think it is. The book he's reviewing is The Restoration of Man, C.S. Lewis and the Continuing Case Against Scientism. We're not out of those woods yet. Nice article to review about scientism, the problem we have with vocabulary, how you're tracing this back centuries, and then how good C.S. Lewis is even today in continuing to address the problems that we have with scientism and just talking about the nature of reality. So I highly recommend that article to you. It's, again, a book review. I've got another one by Joseph Pearce of the Imaginative Conservative Organization. I like those guys. They like Russell Kirk and the Nashville Agrarians and people like that. They've got some good stuff going on there. And a fella has written an article. Well, Joseph Pearce, the fella I just mentioned, has written an article that's not very long. It's a little easier and shorter than the other one I just recommended to you, about C.S. Lewis and the genius of his clarity, which I think we can identify with. He had one statement in there that I really liked. He said this: "It's not that he makes us smarter than we are, though he does, because we learn things from him. It's that he makes us see that we were smarter than we thought we were." Read it. It's really good. It's a good article. Something else that I have for you. You may remember that earlier this summer. It's supposed to be fall, but feels like the summer's moving on, boy. I went to Nashville for a L'Abri conference, and the keynote speaker was Dick Keyes, who is one of the foremost L'Abri people that are still around. He was the former director of the Southborough, Massachusetts L'Abri, though he also worked with the L'Abri in Switzerland and England. He was also the pastor of the International Presbyterian Church in London, which was founded back when the Schaeffers were still around. And he's got his PhD, or rather he's got his MDiv from Westminster Theological Seminary, which is also Phil Hanner Seminary and Joe Novenson Seminary, if you know about it. written a lot of books and so forth. But Dick Keyes is a great fella, and he had a lecture that was on, it was a cultural commentary thing, and I am linking to you his notes, which are it's almost like word for word his lecture. I've got that there, and then also, now that's a PDF that you can get online, and then also the audio of the lecture itself, which is on Spotify, and so I've got those links for you. I know you'll really enjoy it. It's fairly long, but it's really worthwhile listening to in regards to our culture and why we are where we are and these sorts of things. So check Keyes out. I think that you will really enjoy that. Let's see here. What else have I got going? Oh, our church is putting on a fundraising dinner for the study center. It will be Friday, Friday evening, October 11. The food's going to be great. It's free. And so you might be interested in coming to that. Now, if you want to come, you've got to RSVP to the church. So just contact the church, Anglican Church Redeemer. If you don't know how to get in touch with them, just let me know. Just if you wish to come. And I'll be making a 10-minute or so presentation about the ministry between dinner and dessert and coffee. So that's that. But the food's going to be good. All right, let's see, what else do I have? Okay, now let's talk about my schoolwork. I'm taking an English class at UTC, and initially I thought, this would be a good time for me to read C.S. Lewis's Oh Hell volume, the Oxford, Oxford History. That's what it is. Yeah, the Oxford History of English Literature, OHEL. And his volume on English literature in the 16th century, excluding drama. And I tried to set myself a goal to read this, and then it just kind of didn't happen. It's well worth reading, but it is a technical English literature textbook, and Lewis, he's read everything. And a lot of times when he's talking about something, he says, this is kind of like this person in that story and this person in that book. And you're going, okay, all right, fine. I've never heard that before, but I'll just keep reading. However, in English, one of the passages that we have read is the poem by John Donne, Batter My Heart, O Three-Person God. And I did a paper on that, and in preparation for it, I read whatever I could find in this volume by Lewis on Donne, and I incorporated it in there. And I found it interesting. There's especially a particular part in this that I may stop and talk about some, because it kind of came to me while I was writing my paper. You know how it is when you're writing things, ideas will come to you, which is why writing is so important. So we'll see how this goes. But I wanted to share this with you. I thought you'd find it interesting. It's a wonderful poem. If you've not read the poem, Batter My Heart, Three-Person God, you'll want to do that. I'll read it. I'll just read it where it appears in the paper, and then we'll go on from there, okay? But the title is Batter My Heart as an example of John Donne's pleading to the heavens. C.S. Lewis, in his Oh Hell volume, speaks of how a fellow named George Putnam, in a book he wrote in 1589 called The Art of English Poesy, describes a poet as a kind of pleader, P-L-E-A-D-E-R, somebody who's pleading. And Lewis says that the pleader, the poet pleader, must use all the tricks of debate in trying to, get what he's looking for, anticipating answers, and making wise as if he set but light by some points which he has really no intention of conceding. And then Lewis goes on to say that the conception of the poet as a pleader was magnificently realized by John Donne. Okay, so the idea is that there's this kind of poet is making a plea for something, and Lewis says Donne was the expert. And then I continue, certainly Donne's Batter My Heart is an apt case in point. Now here's the poem. Batter my heart, three-person God, for you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, seek to mend, that I may rise and stand, overthrow me, and bend your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. I, like a usurped town to another do, labor to admit you, but oh, to no end. Reason, your viceroy in me should defend, but is captive and proves weak or untrue. Yet dearly I love you, and would be loved fain, but am betrothed unto your enemy. Divorce me, untie or break that knot again. Take me to you, imprison me. For I, except you enthrall me, never shall be free, nor ever chaste, except you ravish me. Putnam's ideal of poetry was still influenced by what Lewis calls the drab age of poetry that wasn't very good. But Donne's language transcends the limits with which Putnam was familiar. Lewis says, quote, John Donne creates a kind of poem that had never been heard before, unquote. Two basic elements of his work, Donne's work, according to C.S. Lewis, were its immediate, in media res, in the middle of things quality, which comes across as extemporary speech, and then, of course, his passionate and vivid vocabulary. And Donne uses this creativity as he pleads to the heavens. In his first stanza, one does indeed find Donne in the middle of something that's been going on for some time. It's like the first Star Wars movie. Starts episode 4, The New Hope. It's like, oh, we're right in the middle of something. What's been going on? The subject of the poem, Donne himself, he's been seeking a restoration of close fellowship with his Lord, but it's not been going very well. He recognizes that God himself must do a work in his heart to effect this return, but it seems to Donne that God is not acting up to snuff. The divine operations on his heart have been too weak to deal with the severity of his condition. God is merely knocking and breathing and shining. And Donne has tired of this treatment, and he pleads for God to act in a much more violent fashion. He wants God to batter his heart. And there may be in this image something of an anticipation of the sieged town. The town is under siege, to which he will allude in the second stanza. Instead of merely knocking and breathing on the town gate, Donne needs God to shatter the thing. His condition requires nothing less. So in the first breath of this poem, we're confronted sharply with Donne's expression, which is both immediate and vivid. If someone were to say that the word plead was too meek of a word to use for this poem, the word demand is not far from what Donne is expressing. And if anyone's being meek here, Donne thinks that God is being too much so. He behaves as if he desires only to mend his heart. Donne knows that his heart's too far gone for simple mending. He needs to be overthrown. He needs God to exercise his force and deal with him in the manner of an ironsmith, so it seems to me. His hard heart is like a metal vessel that must be broken up and remade in the furnace with the bellows blowing, his substance burning until he's malleable enough to be remade altogether. And so the first stanza sets forth Donne's complaint or his plea and his opinion of how God's treatment of him has been going and in how it needs to proceed. He then enlarges his predicament with a second stanza and the walled town. Donne's picture and the language with which he depicts it reminds one so very much of John Bunyan's town of Mansoul in his book Holy War. If you've never read the Holy War before, you probably have read Pilgrim's Progress, but you ought to read Holy War. It's really good. It's about how Christ the King comes and rescues this town, Mansoul, and it's just got all kinds of really great stuff in it. One perhaps cannot help but wonder if John Bunyan had read Donne's lines here about this town under siege, because Bunyan lived after John Donne. Donne's heart is like a walled town, and he desires for his king to enter. And here he alludes again to the recent past and its poor success. He himself is laboring to overcome whatever resistance to God's entry he might find in his heart. Due to the enthrallment to the devil that he finds his heart to still have, though I say, in spite of his being regenerate. And I'm going to come to that kind of thing here again in a minute. However, Donne's efforts are to no end. His most powerful ally, reason, capital R, is patently too weak to overcome the resistance to God's entry. He absolutely must have outside help. And to borrow from John Bunyan's Holy War, Emmanuel, the prince, must besiege him and batter down the door. Now, Donne, being Donne, if you know anything about some of Donne's earlier poetry, which was very sensual, at any rate, I would just go on. Donne, being Donne, cannot help, it seems, to move toward more sensual language as the intensity of his pleading with God grows. He speaks so directly and intimately. He says, "Yet dearly I love you, God, and I would fain be loved by you." And he introduces the metaphor of marriage, and he speaks of himself as requiring a divorce from his marriage to the enemy, which condition, however, though he feel it to be so, really cannot be so in the light of his baptism. Okay, so what I'm saying is this. Donne talks about God needing to break this slavery he has to the devil, though he is a Christian. Well, now, if he's a Christian, this slavery to the devil has been broken. So why does he speak like it's still there? And then he talks about how he's married to the devil. He needs God to divorce him from his enemy. Well, isn't that what happens in baptism? Don't we forsake the works of the devil? Because God is freeing us from whatever relationship with the devil we had before we became his. So what's going on here? Is Donne being a heretic? I mean, is it wrong for him to be talking like this because he's saying something that's true about himself, but theologically? And look, Donne was the canon of St. Paul's Cathedral. He was one of the top men in the Church of England. He knew his theology. He was a great Christian leader, but he seems to be forgetting it in his poetry. Well, I want to deal with that a little bit. And here's what I say. Emotions can certainly be stirred in a heart which are contrary to what one knows to be true in the mind. All right? You can feel something and you're feeling it but you're thinking, but that can't be so, but you're still feeling it. And those emotions can be so intense that one feels the need to express them, even though there may be mental reservations about them. And then I say, we must allow the poet to do so. Okay? If a poet is going to be expressing his heart or his feelings, or the feelings that are common to human beings or something, if it be the case that sometimes these emotions can be contrary to what we know is true, yet if the poet is going to, with his words, express these things, then he's going to have to actually say something that theologically he knows is not accurate. So you wind up with a poem that, if you are being a stickler for theology, are going to say he shouldn't have said that. But what is the nature of the poem? Is it to teach theology, or is it to express the heart? We find David in the Psalms crying out to God, saying things about God that he'll contradict later on. So some of the hymn writers, such as Charles Wesley, in order to express the emotions, and Wesley will do this, language must be used which, if compared with theological facts, may be considered an error. But if feelings, whether erroneous or not, are to be expressed, if you're going to write a hymn expressing how you feel towards God or about yourself, then erroneous language must be allowed if those emotions are to be truly represented, because sometimes to truly represent it, because the truth about the emotion is that you're feeling something you really shouldn't need to be worrying about right now. Okay? So, fear, for example. Jesus was all the time having to tell the disciples, don't be afraid. They're feeling afraid. Jesus is standing there saying, you have no reason to be afraid. It's me. Okay? Everything is all right. But they're feeling, even though their mind is going, well, yeah, I mean, it looks like Jesus. You get the point? So, if a saint feels himself deserted from God, even though God promises in the Bible he will not desert the saint, that saint must be allowed to say he is deserted if he is to express the feeling of desertion. Like in some hymns. And then this is where I get on. This is where I make a little comment here. It is for this reason that hymn editors for modern editions of hymn books can be so odious, as they alter language that's meant to express the heart because those words don't tally with their heads. You see what I'm saying there? Oh, Wesley shouldn't have said that. That's Arminian. We need to straighten this out and make it Calvinistic and change the words in our hymnal. It's poetry expressing the human heart. That's what he said. Let him say it. Because there are times in our lives when we feel like that way, don't we? There are times when we feel like God's left us and we complain, like David. God, you left me. Or there's that Psalm like 73, where he's saying, man, all the stuff I've been going through has just been a waste of time and in vain. Look how prosperous, all these wicked people are. Why am I troubling myself? But then he says, I go back to the sanctuary and I worship and I realize, I understand now. So are we going to cut out the first part of Psalm 73 and say, oh, but you shouldn't say things like that? It's just, it's literature. It's poetry. Let the guy express himself. And if what he says, like John Donne, when he says, I'm a slave to the devil. No, you're not. And you're not. I mean, you're a doctor of theology in the Church of England, but that's the way you feel, and so that's the way you express yourself. Because isn't it true, when there's just times when the honest expression of our desire with God is maybe frustration. God, why are you waiting so long? Or God, I just feel like you don't love me anymore. And the scriptures teach us that if we're going to walk with God, we have to be honest about what's going on in our interior. It's very important. And so God doesn't, God knows what's going on. There are just times when we're just telling God how we feel. Now, that's not going to wind up being where we're going to go with this, or what we really believe or we're going to believe or anything. It's just existentially where we are at. So, I probably can quit preaching about that. Let's finish this up. John Donne pleads with God from the heart, with all of its fears and awful imaginations. He's miserable, and he must belong to the true spouse of his soul. God must do something, for indeed he really must do something. He's in bad shape. But must God do as Donne demands? Must he batter? Though he actually holds the key to the gate. I mean, why have to knock down a gate when you can just open it up? Must he reforge, though he's already made new in Christ? Must God invade, though Christ has already taken up residence in his heart? Does God have to divorce Donne from another, although he's already the part of the bride of Christ? Must God ravish him, though he's already entirely his? Well, Donne certainly feels all this to be necessary during this moment in his life represented in this verse, and so he boldly pleads with language so dramatic and so intemperate and so argumentatively brutal, says Lewis, that Lewis says, or rather Lewis speaks of it as the twisted strength of Donne. Okay. Well, that's taking insights from C.S. Lewis's English literature book, reading a poem about John Donne, reading Donne's poem, and then also just trying to make sense of the language there. It's interesting how Lewis says, Donne was like this tortured soul. He was his language is just so strong. And it's because he's pleading with God and he knows how to plead. Donne is a pleader, boy. He really knows how to do it. Okay, let's see here. All right, I'm going to end with something that I found that I thought was really beautiful. It's Donne's poem set to music. So I will splice that in here when I finish up. But thanks again for your support. I keep telling you, I've been telling you over the summer months that I'm trying to get things arranged to where you can start giving in a tax-deductible way. I'm sorry that it hasn't been done yet. I really, 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 really think it can be done next month, as long as because when I'm hoping to get this form off to Nashville by the end of this week. If they'll just turn it around to me, fairly quickly, and say, we've received this and it's approved and so forth, then we really should be able to do that. And I will be shutting the Patreon down. Sorry. But I sure appreciate you so much. And I'll be sending out, I'm hoping, I was going to do that today. Don't know if it's going to work out, but I'm hoping to send out another prayer update as well. There'll be some things that I haven't mentioned today that'll be on that. But in the meantime, God bless you all. Thanks again for the support, and we'll be back with you soon. Bye now.